إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. You are doing ibadah, you are only worshipping Allah, and you are asking the help only from Him. You are worshipping and you are asking for the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So remember, this is the only one that we ask help from. So those little amulets that you, in my country when I grew up, I had it when I was a kid. They tied it on my neck, it had a square here. It was made out of leather, and it had some ayats. I had to wear it on my neck or on my arm, right? When I was in Turkey, my wife and I were walking in the marketplace. They were selling these. You could buy anyone you want. They were, oh, this is for good luck, this is for this is for that, you know. So it's the marketplace. I even took a picture of it, right? So all these, you're not asking the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're asking the help of something else. But otherwise, the help only of Allah is to be asked. And Allah is the only one to be worshipped, yes.
What is the difference between asking Allah for help and asking our friends for help?
Well, I mean, of course, you know, asking Allah is the ultimate help that you need. So, for example, oh Allah, help me in my understanding of my studies. Help me in gaining wisdom. Help me in opening my mind to learning. But if I'm struggling in math and Abdul Hanis is good in math, I still go to Abdul Hanis and say, can you help me solve this equation?
But why based on the ayah? You see that?
No, this is also understanding of this. You see this primary, right? That Allah is the primary one. Abdul Hanis is only a secondary tool that I went to, or a vehicle by which I will get my task completed with assistance from him. Yeah. And by the way, the Sahabas really did not like to get assistance from anyone or help from anyone. By the way, they just did things for themselves. Like they would be riding a horse, and if they, you know, the reins of a horse, that you hold the horse, that when you are riding, you hold those two sort of ropes, and those are the ones that you ride the horse, and you can pull. Horse turns to the right or left, you know, and so on. You know those, right? They're called reins. And if the rein was down, you know, they would get down to pick it up. And one of the Sahabas was there, and he said, why don't you just ask me? I'll just give it to you. I said, and he said, no, we've been told to ask no favors from anyone. And really, meaning that let people do things for themselves. Unless you obviously need help, you're handicapped, you are behind in something, you don't understand something, then you go for help. I'm not saying don't get help, but I'm just giving you a life example of this habit. Do get help if that equation in math is difficult for you, certainly. Da'wah and aqidah. Okay, so we started on the subject of al-aqidah, and we started on talking about al-tawheed. And I told you this is why Allah created us in the beginning. But also this is the reason why Allah sent messengers, al-anbiya wal-mursaleen. He also revealed the books, and He also created us for this, to show His oneness. In other words, all ibadah is directed to Him in the Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Okay, so we know the famous verse, مَخْلَقَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That I did not create the jinns and mankind except that they had to worship me. Okay? So we know also the first 13 years of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where were they spent the first 13 years? Huh? How many years did the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam spend in Makkah? 20? 13? Who says 13? Who knows for sure? Why is it that you're kind of hesitant? Raise your hand, let me see your hand. Who is raising their hand? So, you're not, the others, you're not sure? Alia, you're not sure? You're sure? Okay, why don't you raise your hand then? It is 13 years. The Rasul ﷺ lived in Makkah for 13 years. So, at 13 years, Hijrah took place to Medina, where he finished the rest of his life in Medina. And if you look at the ayats, the Makki surahs that were revealed, many of them dealt with the aqidah. They dealt with worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They dealt with al-ghayb, the belief in the hereafter, which is you don't see, it's the unseen world, paradise and hellfire and things like that, right? So the Rasul ﷺ dealt a lot with al-aqidah during this time. Also the instructions to Mu'adh when he went to Yemen, that when Allah sent to Mu'adh to his own country, Mu'adh was from Yemen, we know that from the Seerah. So he was sent to his own people to call them to Islam. And Rasulullah ﷺ had a dialogue with him and he asked him those questions. What would you call them to? And he said, first I would call them to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he was establishing the logic and the sequence of what he would do first. So that means he placed Aqidah first, and then after that, Rasulullah when he asked him after that, then he went, and then I will tell them about Arkanul Islam, that they have to pray, they have to pay zakat, they have to, and so on. And so these were the instructions. So we know that carefully from the dialogue of Rasulullah and Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. And of course, anytime you ignore Tawheed, you enter into shirk. Okay, so I saw this very interesting program on National Geographic. I watched the National Geographic quite a lot. And so they were talking about a Muslim community. They didn't say they were Muslim. I knew from their looks and how the program went. So they lived in Africa, and the program was talking about termites, which really were very aggressive. They would destroy their houses, you know, and so on. They eat the wood, the termites. And these guys were now calling on their God and their ancestors to bring, the tribe was known as the Mofu tribe, to bring a certain type of ant. And that particular ant usually attacks the termites. But they were not calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that program, they were calling on their ancestors, on their forefathers. But they were Muslim. You could see they were wearing kufi, they went to pray, you know, and things like that. They were a Muslim community. And so this is not like 100 years ago. This is like stuff I saw last year. So there are still communities in the world that have this issue. So don't think this is now, we're past this stage. That's not true. There are still communities that have this issue, that they call on ancestors instead of calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also remember that any ignorance in Tawheed, we rule according to our laws instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which leads me to this category. Have you ever heard of this Tawheed before? It is not mentioned a lot. In many settings, it is not mentioned a lot, this Tawheed. Only those three categories is what you will hear. But when you study the subject in detail and in depth, you will come across this one. So when I was studying with my sheikh, we dealt a lot with this, which is Tawheed al-Tahkim. And Hukum, which means laws or rules, is where this word is derived from. The Hakim, so Al-Hukuma is the government. So I'm showing you the extension of this word. And so the ruler, the Al-Hakim is the ruler, who is like the king or the sultan or whoever it is that is ruling that country. So it's actually Tawheed of rulership. What do we mean by this? That mankind is to rule by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it comes from an ayah in the Quran. Actually, the